You've most likely heard the name David Otto, millions around the world have. But you probably have no idea what actually happened with his band life and music over the past few years, even if you've met him. David is one of the brightest minds of our age, a nice guy, never-ending ambition and enthusiasm. He's hard-working, charming, reliable, and caring with a great sense of humor. His greatest adversary is the evil force of people lying about him. It happens on an industrial level, not just little ones, hideous, false things to affect his fans and supporters and to take the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of playing in his band away from hopeful performers. But this is different to anything in history before it. No celebrity lie campaign has ever been this bad or been activated as deep into the person's life. As you'll soon see, David is one of those good-natured people where you have to lie to say anything bad about him. You'll see that any bad claims surrounding his otherwise beautiful projects are all after a certain date, long into his career when one particular person came into his life. The torture through false reputation and mistreatment out of false virtue has gone on long enough. This program seeks wide public understanding and community repair of what went on and for the public record to be corrected with the full context and the rest of the story that was desperately hidden by the people behind the lie campaign until now. You'll find out who they all are throughout the program. These are the real villains of the David Otto story.
While the animation is a little basic in this first stage, it does help share the story. This is an animated storyboard of what's to become a dramatic reenactment of one of the most amazing and important stories in music and entertainment. There is absolutely none other like it. You will get to see everything that happened and what people did as a result of the fake news articles that they otherwise were not doing and would never have done, and what an Australian TV station did to try to cover it all up. Many have been affected by the lies to keep his talents hidden. Now it's time for everyone to know the truth and be relieved to feel a whole new way. And we don't just mean lies in a general sense. We're talking about where a person makes up something like a serious crime occurring and saying it on television, when they know that no such thing ever happened, and trying to get police and courts to give a life sentence, then getting caught out lying under oath and the case gets thrown out. No one should have to go through that. These were the kind of lie campaigns where skilled journalists were bribing and coercing girls by harassing, scaring and strong-arming them into lying about a fun experience they had, or else have a bad article done about them and their family if they don't lie on camera.
We will now show you what David saw during the period of first bringing his fantastic music and architecture dreams into reality for the world's enjoyment. With the truth of this story defending even greater future achievement, it will light the way to greatness for many. As we said, we may use this sketch as a storyboard for a live-action mini-series in time to come. Either way, here's what really happened. Some background. Okay, so in case you didn't know already, rock musician David Otto was born in Brisbane, Australia. His mother was from Liverpool in England and his father was from Germany. He technically had two mothers, Anne Shirley and her sister Mary. They shared in the raising of him along with his 5 other aunts who were all from Liverpool but settled in Australia. His Aunt Jackie even dated one of the Beatles, Ringo Starr, when they were in the same youth group together. As a result, he grew up with a well-spoken, slightly British accent. After migrating to Australia, David's family bought a house on Morton Island where they would spend every summer catching waves, singing around bonfires, and dig phosphorus in the shallows of the ocean at night, which made it glow. It was a beautiful way to grow up, and there was always high-quality music playing around the house. Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Pavarotti, and classic Hollywood musicals. The place was always thriving with beautiful sound and happiness. Trips to the theater, art gallery, and ballets. It was an upbringing rich in culture, tradition, live performance, and the great works of history. He developed a very eclectic taste, and it was a very moral household. Having such a big family teaches you to share and be generous, be truthful, and know wrong from right. Music was everything in his family, and each of his aunts lived close by, and all of the cousins would orbit between each other's homes after school listening to Elvis, Elton John, Paul Simon, the Eagles, Tom Jones, Billy Joel, and many more. It gave him a sense of melody and the great atmosphere music could create for people. Music was life itself. It made everyone happy. David's favorite thing when he was 6 years old was his new ghetto blaster. He also loved his home PC and would code his own games to play. Always ahead of his time, this was in an era when computer coding wasn't a class at school yet and an SD card was a cassette tape. He started learning piano with a local teacher but stopped going to lessons after a few months because he was too busy drawing the Coca-Cola and McDonald's logo on his music sheets. He was kinda bored. He could already play all the songs he was given. Perhaps a precursor of the mix of music and corporations that was to come. After a few more years riding bikes and rewiring his remote control cars to run faster like a typical kid, David picked up his mother's guitar at age 11 and never put it down. He found a long-haired shred guitar tutor and started mastering Steve Vai solos in his first class, quickly mastering entire albums of music by Motley Crue, Metallica, Steve Vai, Pearl Jam, then later Korn, Marilyn Manson, and hundreds of others. He had a university-level knowledge of music long before he even finished high school. At age 12, he started practicing 4 hours a day and more on weekends. He even developed computerized practice software he used to develop far faster playing skills than normal, and this back in the 1990s. Because of the high score on his entry examination, David was awarded with a special entry scholarship to one of Brisbane's most prestigious private schools. He would dedicate every lunch hour to composing soundscapes in the school music lab, foregoing his breaks to learn new ways to express himself through sound. At the age of 14, he was picked as the preeminent guitar player out of over 1,000 and went on his first interstate music tour with a 20-piece jazz band. He also played more contemporary music in his own rock bands on weekends. He went on more interstate tours, won 5 Best Guitarist Awards, 2 Songwriting Awards, and after graduating high school in his first year of university, his new band topped the state after winning a Best Alternative Album Award. In a 2-page spread about how to form a successful band in the music section of the state's major newspaper. Winning that award came with a performance at the Tivoli Club in Brisbane on the same stage where some of David's favorite acts had played, and it seemed that after all the hard work so far, he was finally on his way. It seemed there was no limit to how far this music prodigy could go. Then came his first radio interviews, graduating from university with a degree in music, film, and TV. Then he was handpicked to play guitar and do backing vocals for a Billboard Top 20 and ARIA Award-nominated artist. ARIA is the Australian version of the Grammy Awards. On those tours, the crowds up to sizes of 25 with people asking for signatures after the show. Then the band performed on Australia's Channel 10 with David broadcast performing and singing to over 2 million people on a Saturday night hosted by rock music legend Molly Meldrum. In true hard-working rock band style, he then flew to Brisbane with the band's manager, drove the tour van 18 hours north, and with no sleep pulled up to the club, loaded the gear in, and played a blistering 20-minute set. David then formed his own record label, attended the ARIA Awards red carpet ceremony as a special guest, networking with all the most notable musicians in the industry, including Powderfinger, John Butler, and productive career conversations with the Black Eyed Peas about music, how to build a successful long-term career. Call it celebrity magnetism, but David always had a knack for bumping into notable celebrities. One time he was out around Brisbane shopping for a couch for his studio and bumped into Alice Cooper, who was on tour that night. David and Alice walked and talked for a while, talking about golf and music success, and Alive wish him well for his career after offering some useful advice about making sure your stage show was dramatic to keep the audience's attention. David expanded his music school, hiring tutors to help teach his overflow of students. This guy now had something to teach that no one else had. He can show you how to go from beginner to Billboard artist rock music tour because he's done it. The natural next step was to compose the rest of his own catalog and build a long-term career promoting and playing those songs. He started booking more of his own gigs, wrote and recorded 20 albums of music. Predict This, Bad Alien Girl, Circle of Flames, David Otto, This Is David Otto, One More Reason, Boy, Girl Club, The Infinite Gift, Golden Ocean, and many more. It's world class. His music and his voice are liquid gold from the quality of the music he was raised on. From studying marketing in university and rock music his whole life, he knew he needed a gimmick for his music to catch people's attention, to make it stand out. Like Kiss had the face paint and Act had the Angus Young schoolboy look. He especially liked how the best bands had their sound and found their look, then never quit. The best ones engineered everything themselves, built their own studios, designed their own logos, wrote all their own songs, pressed the CDs, booked their own venues, and promoted it all themselves. He could do that. David had done photography part-time for fun since learning how to operate a camera professionally at university, and he built a portfolio for one of his girlfriends at the time who wanted to be a model. More girls then came to him because he knew how to take a great-looking photo. On more than one occasion, the girl looking at the photos afterwards would tear up and exclaim, "I never thought I could look that good." He'd also started designing fashion for his film clips, from becoming friends with various fashion designers who were also on the music scene. The band outfits he designed played off like a cute little uniform with logos on it, and the girls loved wearing them. There was a power in the paradox of how feminine the outfits were but how heavy the music was. A unique brand had started to form, and since he now had all this music, cool fashion designs, had top-level industry mentors, and knew hundreds of models from doing photography, and he knew how to teach from building a music school, and he blended all those elements together into the model rock band. It was very matching to where he grew up on an island listening to music. The concept was simple, the best ones always are: dress in beachwear, play rock guitar. It was a cool concept, just a cool eye-catching concept to bring attention to his music, to sell more of it like Kiss or AC/DC. Some girls became interested in him sometimes, yes, but the purpose was always to play the music he had written. Not that there's anything wrong with the Dan Bilzerian or High Hefner, where it's strictly lifestyle activities with the girls they have around. But this was more intellectual. It's about performing and promoting the music David had written to sell albums and tickets to the shows, and you'll see that come through. It was taking elements he was already surrounded by and tailoring them into something that looked and sounded incredible, and he had the skill and the rapport with people to pull it off. Most of all, he had the talent and did the work. Running a model rock band is one of the busiest and most demanding jobs you could imagine, juggling the tasks of singing, writing, recording, marketing, tuition classes, booking festivals, helping handle the challenges that came up in the girls' lives, and so much more. But he loved the challenge of it all, and the end result of each performance was so extremely rewarding. It was his calling in life, and he loved the challenge of it because the end result was so breathtaking when the girls could finally play and it was his music they were playing. It worked too. It always has. The new look of the band booked him some of his biggest gigs, 1,000 to 5,000 people at a carnival on the east side of Brisbane, the girls thrashing around in lingerie performing his rock music in the rain. It was iconic. But you're asking, well then, if he's now in his 30 seconds and only been a hard-working musician with no interactions with authorities basically ever, then where did all the hideous crime stories all come from? Well, get there. He'd even found a way to build a grassroots following to give his students a chance to shine by hosting a space and having each performer bring 7 or so family and friends. The place was packed. He figured he could do this on a larger scale and keep everything in-house. He had an iconic image. He'd given his old school bandmates a chance to be in the band, but they were too busy. And the models were more punctual because they wanted to be performers like David. Giving his old bandmates a chance to play his music solidified that David's band was models in beachwear. And that was it. There were more options and it suited his colorful music. David sang U2 and Metallica songs in a covers band for a short period after being asked to fill the spot by a friend from his sailing team. But the guys never wanted to leave the practice room. Life just kept bringing David back to the model rock band playing his music. That was his destiny. The girls actually wanted a career in entertainment, and it was easy for him to train models into rock guitarists because he'd been running weekly classes since he was 17 years old and knew how to pace things so they could learn quickly. Loving the vibe his music created, the girls couldn't get enough and began staying later and later to practice, and ended up taking rooms in his place to be able to practice each day and minimize travel. This was common for musicians, and this is what NSYNC, the Spice Girls, Nirvana, and hundreds more first did to master all the music together, and it acclimatizes the group for touring. Since they were already in the practice studio room playing music each day, the band added a live stream in 2009 where fans from all over the world would pay to watch the band perform from the model band house each week, which grew into a nightly online TV talk show as fans wanted to know more about each player and how they were going with the songs. Originally, the band house had a cool landlord with multiple properties, so he was never there. Just collected his rent and got on with his life. But a new, pompous and very arrogant owner bought the property and soon after called David up and stated that David had to let the landlord, Ewan, move into the band house with the half-dressed girls all the time. David still had to pay full rent and share the facilities. Obviously, David said no to protect the girls who were happy living with David, to protect them from this weird man who was forcing his way into the place against everyone's will. Ewan was the name. He has never been the focus of any public story about David, but he is now. Ewan often turned up unannounced, which made David wonder if he was also driving past the property at other times. Naturally, David did what was right. He was under no obligation to let this guy into the house while he was on a lease, and the band now had a lot of subscribers online and interstate shows booked, and he had money saved to buy a place and a lot of savings invested in this next tour already. Even though there was no reason to move, David negotiated that the band move to a larger property in September after they complete all their tour dates in August. Ewan agreed to this, then broke his word. Ewan kicked the band into the street the day before their concert in Melbourne to stop them from going. He couldn't have them, so he wanted to control them. He said they had to be out on the Thursday or else their stuff would be thrown in the street, all because David protected this weird landlord from forcing himself into the band house. This is what a creep really looks like. The band fortunately found a place to move into at late notice, but it was 3 hours away, but they managed to clear the house and slept on the deck of the new place, hoping to get the keys the next morning. Move thousands of dollars in band equipment into the house out of the weather, then get on a flight to Melbourne that afternoon and play the show face to face to their online fans. The next morning, though, the ex-landlord was irate because he didn't get what he was trying to force David and the girls into, so he called the new place the band was moving into and told the new agent not to let them in until they came back and did more cleaning. This was a trick, though. When the band got back to Brisbane to clean up more, Ewan had told them they had to clean but at the same time locked the house so they couldn't get in. It's time to stop giving David the treatment a man like Ewan actually deserves. The rent was paid. This was about the landlord wanting to force himself into the house where David was training the band. The new agent finally agreed to give the band the keys to the new place regardless of what Ewan was saying, but it was too late. Their flight had already gone. They barely got back in time to put the band's studio and out of the rain, and the band couldn't even stream because there was no Wi-Fi or internet connected at the new place for many weeks. Some years later, even after no contact, Ewan was still so overwrought with jealousy that he started screaming at David that he was going to kill him out in an open street. Ewan began rumors just because he couldn't have them in the inappropriate way that he wanted. David has to completely rebuild his act from scratch because of what this creep had done, displacing him. The whole thing cost David about $20,000. Just buy a shirt, bro. While living in Rainbow Beach, he penned and recorded one of his most beautiful albums of music to date, Orange Hibiscus, Better Ever, in the iconic rock classic, Four Blade. After a few months, David moved back nearer to family and started playing gigs again, now just with a backing track. After 6 months in a new place, the band concept had begun to respawn. What Ewan had done was illegal, and to stop would be like Kiss no longer ever wearing face makeup because some guy was jealous of the band's success. That's just not very rock and roll. It was the immature landlord's behavior that needed to be modified and no one else's. What's sad is that those kinds of guys are exactly what the band was supposed to be a break from for the girls. But we promised the viewer that one particular landlord was the reason for the rest of the bad press you've ever seen on David. His name was Eddie, a prison guard who was dismissed from a South African prison for misconduct. Like Ewan, Eddie was friendly at first, so didn't seem like an issue, but over a few months he began the same way. Wanting to be at the apartment more than normal, after hours, trying to talk to the band, always at the door creating awkward moments. Then he started trying to kick the band out because he couldn't have them after seeing them walk in and out for practice. He would wait outside the door to speak to the band girls as they were leaving. He would come up and knock on the door if he saw David go out. He wanted to be up near the band girls David worked day in day out to communicate with, train, and organize. The whole thing is a whole lot of work. That's part of why the girls are attracted to the project. It's a worthwhile challenge and yields a great result because of all the work David puts into it in the background, no less than Angus Young puts into AC/DC. Then when Eddie's ego was finally too hurt from being refused something he should never have been asking for in the first place, he began the attacks. Keep in mind, David has to keep the girls safe because he doesn't know if a guy who wants to hang with the band against their will is also dangerous. In the case of a prison guard who was fired for abusing inmates, it was very likely, and he was a little wiser to it after what he saw Ewan do. So he has to refuse and has paid a huge price to protect his act from people like this from then on. Out of frustration for David protecting the girls from him, Eddie sent a text message to start up the fake David Otto Danger character. Eddie, I'm gonna get police to do a fix on you. Eddie was very comfortable in a prison environment and turned the apartment into a cell block, to then torture the band and waste their time and money for preventing whatever forced interactions he was aiming at. Eddie lied in court to get the band kicked out, but was also trying to stop them from being able to move on anywhere else at the same time. Luckily, David was able to appeal the decision and the court refused the eviction when it was shown that Eddie was lying. Later that night after dark, Eddie was heard screaming and banging on the band's door, "I don't care what the courts say, I'm kicking you out." Violent and sexually frustrated, Eddie then urinated all over David's music equipment in the secure car park. He then masturbated into a sock and pushed it through into the open window of his car. A few days later, he then pulled David aside in the car park and told him metal and flesh don't mix. Eddie was showing out that he was feeling territorial and wanted to be sexually dominant. Eddie then began a relentless series of fake police reports to try to have the band removed a different way because he was so jealous of the life David was able to keep because he had so much to offer the girls and the project was going somewhere. David didn't even know what a police charge was. He had barely had anything to do with police his entire life. What was even stranger was seeing the officer emotional and angry that the fake case was immediately dismissed by the local court for no evidence. The officer, who saw Eddie on a regular basis, had completely made it up. David never imagined police would be emotionally tied to the outcome of a false case. But they were. It was a bad chain reaction because losing the false case, as they should, seemed to motivate them to want to try harder on another one. Eddie wanted to sit with all the girls who were visiting David's apartment for band practice, but they didn't want to be near Eddie. Neither did David. They were there for the music. There was too much work to be done learning songs and promoting to just sit around. David had brought the same work ethic to the model rock band that he had done when he was first practicing. It was constant work. The man never stops. This guy was just completely wasting David's time to punish him for doing what was right by the girls in his band. What Eddie was doing would be like trying to have a jeweler removed from a jewelry store by police because he wouldn't give you free diamonds. Just buy a t-shirt, bro. What do you think about David Otto now? The band managed to play some gigs through all this, but not many. The selfish, controlling behavior was a real drain on their focus. The Ewan thing cost the band about 6 months to clean up, and it's possible that what Eddie started is what led to the life-ruining media scandal. All because a South African landlord couldn't have sex with his tenants' friends. At one point, David reported the landlord to Channel 9. They did nothing. We think it was then that transgressors Channel 9 simply decided it would be juicier to do a fake story on David at some point in the future. Remember, David both back then and still now has no criminal record nor any reason for one. The defamation all started with the prison guard landlord who was obsessed with David's life. At this junction, we would like to clarify that the producers do not feel that what happened here is a reflection on the Queensland Police Service as a whole. While the police misconduct we're about to reveal is factual and densely established in evidence, by and large, police are great people who do a fantastic job protecting the community. The problem came from 30 or 40 bad actors, most likely pushed into it by 9, who used their position as a police officer, or lower-level judge to engage in various ethical malpractices. More recently, it has been discovered that disciplinary action has already been taken against some officers for their role in falsely targeting David and the group. Eddie, the landlord, kept trying for eviction because David protected the girls from him. Eddie now had to pay David's costs in court for bringing the defective and malicious false case, which probably made him angrier, but he cost David a lot of time and money trying to force himself onto the band girls. No one ever thinks about that part. The band eventually moved to a new property that David was on the title of, but more on that later.